Hi, my name is Ford, and today I'll be talking about dyslexia as it relates to teachers and the education profession. So first, I want to give a little bit of just background information. So first, I'm going to talk a little bit about language. Obviously, in this world, we have various different languages: English, French, German, Spanish, and a whole long list of other ones. But all of them have some of these common features. The first one being semantics. Semantics is the meaning behind the word or phrase being stated. And so if I were to say, I want a hamburger, that the semantic of that phrase is that I have a desire for a hunger for this piece of food, the hamburger. Whereas the syntax is the correct sentence structure or the proper grammar for that word or phrase. And so the kind of application for this is that, say, take the same sentence, I want a cheeseburger, I want a hamburger, whatever the sentence is, there's that proper grammar where it sounds right and everything, and it's in the correct order. But if I were to say cheeseburger wants I, that is a sentence that doesn't make any sense in the English language as it's not in the proper order, and so it has no meaning either because we don't know what the individual is asking for because in terms of the syntax it's off, and so we can't really decipher what that individual may want. Um, the next kind of related topic to dyslexia that I want to briefly talk about is language perception. And so they have these three ideas I'm going to talk about. The first one being co-articulation. This is the idea that when there's differing words or phrases that have overlapping sounds, it can lead them to sound similar. And so this could be with words such as like mom or dog, or maybe especially if there's some other things going on, like maybe there's a lot of background noise, it might be hard to distinguish between those two words being said, um, since they have some kind of sound similarities to each other. Um, and this kind of is related to the next topic as well of the invariance problem, which is when it is difficult to distinguish between two words or phrases due to their common core features. And so like the words like mom and dog, they both have that O in the middle of their uh, structure. And so they obviously have that similarity piece that at their core features that can be difficult to distinguish, especially if there's like background noise or something else going on. And then the next topic is how there's this theory of categorical perception, which is the idea that um, our brains treat language stimuli differently than we do with other sound stimuli, with sound stimuli being anything that we hear and process that way. And so with language stimuli, the theory is that we perceive speech just into discrete categories. And so this is the idea that um, our words and sentences are put into like mental buckets, if you will, where there is no in between. Kind of to give a visual representation of like, say there's a cup, like four buckets, and you have these items that are going into the buckets, say like toys. One's like a toy car, one's a toy hammer, and so on and so on. You can't rip apart a toy and put it into two buckets or more than two buckets. That toy has to go into one, bucket two, bucket three, or bucket four. And that's the idea with words, where there is you either hear the word, you don't hear the word, it is a word, it is not a word, there is no in between. And so like the word is the word. There is no other it is not half of a word, it's not part of a word. That is it is all or nothing. And that is the way that we perceive language. And that can explain a lot in terms of how we can recognize words, perceive words, and understand what people are saying. And that brings us to what dyslexia is. So dyslexia is a learning disability and it impacts reading and language tasks, typically thought to be in a negative manner. It's due to disruptions in brain processing, which I will discuss in further detail in just a moment. And those afflicted with dyslexia often struggle with reading, have difficulty writing and spelling, and problems storing words in their mental mind and along with their meaning as well. And they might have trouble forming sentences in addition as well. And so, as for what's going on in the brain with dyslexia, it's very large in part to the things that we just discussed, where like with language perception, an individual that has dyslexia may have a brain component or brain structure that makes it additionally difficult for individuals with the co-articulation and variance problem compared to the regular individual. So like you can kind of think of it as in a spectrum where a normal individual, if you will have some level of difficulty with co-articulation, some level of difficulty with the invariance problem, and an individual with dyslexia might reach that clinical or significant level of difficulty with it, where they then get the label of being dyslexic due to that the structures in their brain having a greater difficulty with co-articulation and the invariance problem compared to the regular or typical neurotypical individual. And so it all has to do with that, how the brain is processing and storing those words in that language in their mind, and then retrieving that information to then be spelled out. And that all is in large part is due to the language processing, which again, in large part has to do with the co-articulation and invariance problem in terms of how it relates to dyslexia. There are things we can do to help improve that though. Like there's been research that shows that exposure to rhythms and music during phonological and linguistic development can be really beneficial for individuals, especially if they're at risk for dyslexia or maybe are showing symptoms of dyslexia, as there's been evidence that shows the rhythms and sounds and kind of the musical aspect of words and speech has a large part in the development of the brain structures required for speech and understanding speech. And so if the individual is exposed to more music and rhythm and has a greater grasp of that, that strengthens the brain processing that goes on during the understanding, acquisition, and retrieval of speech in the brain. And so the way that this applies to teaching, I think, is very, very obvious and very applicable, as it's simply just exposing your students to more music, like doing some music groups, playing some music, even maybe during some study time or whatever it may be, or maybe doing some kind of like choir group or musical task with them, especially if you're talking about younger individuals where they are during that kind of linguistic development, doing that kind of sing-along group or musical activity with them not only makes it more engaging and fun and creative for the students, but also can help improve their speech acquisition and retrieval, and really can help prevent or dyslexia and help their speech development. And so, and here are my references. And so I hope that these slides helped show how the development of dyslexia goes in the brain, and some things that we can do to help prevent that and the application to teaching. Thank you for listening.